Hi.
It's a
No need to call me ma'am. It's all fine. Sophia is fine.
it's a pleasure to meet you and have you here on our show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I have some questions for you today.
Go
So
ahead.
so let me proceed with my first question. Ma'am, what made you move into the world of poetry?
Ah, when I was 6 years old, um, I was separated from my father, and I was sad, and that sadness drove me to poetry. And there was a very big tree. We lived in a kind of place uh, for families of prisoners of war, and it was called the Services Club. And there was a very large banyan tree, and I used to climb the branches of this tree, and it made me feel warm and protected and safe inside that tree. And from that tree, I used to watch everything. Nobody could see me, but I could see everybody, and I liked doing that. I liked climbing up the tree, and pretty soon I had an older brother who made both of us a kind of simple tree house. And I used to remember that my mother used to bring rusks and mango squash, and we used to just take them all up in the tree. And I started writing because of sadness, and because the tree gave me a unique perspective onto the world outside. It changed your perspective, because when you are little, you only see the world from your height.
Yes, ma'am.
But when you climb up a tree, you can change the perspective that you see everything from. And that unique perspective inspired me to write. And it grew into something that made me happy, and it allowed me to express myself. I was very shy as a girl. I didn't really talk very much to people, but I talked through my writing.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the biography you have written about your mother has been on our book list since its release in 2019. There has been a question of how it came to your mind of retelling her history of in the 21st century among the new generation.
Well, my mother's life was very, very difficult, in the sense that after she divorced and remarried, she remarried my father, and that marriage was happy, but she always suffered because of the separation from her children. But in her new life, she never talked to anybody about what had gone past. All her suffering was kind of buried.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I feel that it happens to many women who have gone through suffering, but they don't talk about it.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's a kind of culture of silence. You take everything and you just don't talk, at least publicly, about it. And so I felt that it was very important to tell her story, because all these stories are kind of suppressed and silenced. And I feel that in the 21st century, where we have Me Too, uh, these kind of stories where women are abused and suffer in silence should not be allowed to continue anymore. And as you know, today is International Women's Day. At least I think in India it is already March 8th. It's a very important day in which we must tell the stories that as women that have been suppressed, that have been silenced. So this was the reason, the main reason why I told the story of my mother, is because I didn't want all the suffering that she's gone to be unacknowledged. You know, these are important stories, women's stories.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, did you ever think that literature would take you this far?
Well, uh, I don't know that it has taken me that far. It has, I don't think of it as I've come very far. I think of it as something that I learn every day. Every day is the first day of the rest of your life. And every day you want to do something that will express yourself, and also try to do something fresh with language.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm always looking for that. How do I express myself in a way that is unique and that involves people and makes people read and makes people want to read more, want to know about more about language. I'd like, uh, you know, writing is a solitary act,
Yes, ma'am.
but when people read it, then that it comes alive again. Its first birth is when you give it form on paper or whatever form you give it to electronic media. But the second life of any writing is when young people like you or people read it, and then it comes alive again. So it's a very interesting life, that of a writer. It is both solitary and communal in a way.
Ma'am, what are your future plans for your poetry?
So I have a new collection of poems that is coming out in 2021. This is called Open Zero.
Okay.
And Open Zero is my meditation on life. And these are poems that were written after I lost my home to wildfires in 2017.
Yes, ma'am.
And after that happened, loss of is a huge loss, but it also makes you think. It makes for pretty good poetry, in my opinion, because it when something is taken away, it it allows you to think about what was there and what is the meaning of all of this and how we can um, transcend the loss of material. And ultimately we transcend the loss of material by what is inside us. What is inside us is beyond. uh, we can create again. That's the most beautiful thing about art, is something that is material is gone, but you can always create, and the very loss is a kind of impetus for this creation. So the book Open Zero is a meditation about my the loss that happened, but also about the planet and where it's going with environmental destruction,
Yes, ma'am.
because my home was lost in wildfires directly due to climate change. So there's a lot of meditation, a lot of grief, and a lot of thinking about where we're going
Yes, ma'am.
as people and as the planet. And so from the personal loss to collective loss, and memory and transcendence, hopefully. There's a lot in there.
Ma'am, what message do you want to convey to the upcoming authors and poets?
Writing is a craft just like anything else. The more you practice it, just like you practice music, you do riyaz for music, you need to do riyaz for writing.
Yes, ma'am.
You need to get, I personally would advise you to stay away from the screen and take a pencil and paper or any kind of a very cheap notebook. If you buy fancy notebook,
Yes,
step number one, don't buy fancy notebook. Buy the cheapest notebook you can. Then where you will not feel bad about writing anything in it. So, and then if you can walk, I know it's hard in the pandemic, you're stuck, but
yes,
if you can take a walk or even a short walk anywhere, or even if you are stuck, you can look outside the window. So you must get into the habit of doing a continuous, there is a notebook in which you put some thoughts in it every day,
yes, ma'am.
and then later on you can go back into it, and you'll find that some of those ideas made sense to you later on, and you can go on and add to this collection of your thoughts every day. So if you practice every day, you will definitely improve your craft. Secondly, I'd say read, and more reading. So it is like anything else. The people who wrote very well, you should read their writing. Whatever it is, try to read as much as you can. I'm a real fan, wherever I can get them, of physical books, because this is a personal preference, because I think that when you are reading on your phone or computer or some other device, there is some kind of distraction. So I prefer reading an actual book, taking myself away from the distraction and reading. Sometimes, you whatever you write, the other part is you should read it out aloud. Supposing you wrote a poem or a passage or something, read it out aloud, because writing is communication. And when you read it, and if it's sometimes something looks good on paper, but when you read it, it sounds not so good. So advice, especially for poetry, but for any writing, is read it out aloud. uh, and then, if you want to, you can seek out some other people who write. Find out, do you have any friends, show them, so show each other your writing. Or if you have a mentor, that's fantastic. I'm lucky to have some people that I were, mentors to me at a very early age. So if you can find and seek out people who are, you can show your work to, it's not a must, but it helps. All of it helps.
Ma'am, how was the beginning of your journey as an editor and an author?
So, as an author, early years, I had publishing success. I published at the age of 11. Then I didn't write didn't publish for a long time. I started publishing again in 1999. And that was in a magazine online called Monsoon. And then from there, I started regularly, like, submitting and publishing, and started in online journals and anthologies. And I would say in 2015 is when I published my first book. And editing, I started basically also around maybe 2016, just not that long ago, maybe 5-6 years ago. I started editing a journal called City. It was a quarterly. So we brought out about 6-7 issues of that. And then recently I have done some editing in the latest issue of Poetry at Sangam. And I've also done some essays that I wrote for Scroll and for some other publications. So it's been a little bit of everything. Yes, I think it just, the more you do it, the more work that you do and the more effort that you do put into it, the more it gives you a reward of sending your stuff. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. Do send your stuff out there. Once you have written something, send it. And most likely your early effort will get rejected, but don't lose heart, because even the most famous writers, their writing got rejected in the beginning.
True, ma'am. Ma'am, what is the difference you find in literature back then in the 80s and 90s between literature in the 21st century now?
I don't think that good literature is that affected by time. There may be a difference between current terminology. Obviously, we have cell phones now.
Yes.
We don't have a rotary phone. We have different your how should I say, your sociological landscape has changed
Yes.
in terms of the way we interact with each other. Now we talk about getting on the Zoom call and email, text messages, Snapchat, whatever it is. But I don't think that fundamentally good literature has changed, because you can still read Jane Austen and you can still read all the classics, and you can still read even the classics in in Indian and Hindi and all the regional languages, Urdu literature. That it's timeless. Good literature is timeless. It The subject matter or the landscape may change, but I don't think that fundamentally it changes. What may change now with more awareness of Me Too and the women's movement is that as far as women's writing, it's gotten more, there's more candor and there's more exposure of areas that were once not talked about so much or not written about by women. So in that sense, I think it's a little bit different. But the qualities of good literature are, I think, in a certain sense,
Yes.
timeless.
It was a pretty
Oh,
good.
you're so welcome. It was great to talk to you. Such lovely questions.
I'm honored to talk with you here today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll meet you soon.
Okay.